Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. I'm your host, Danny Nierenberg. Today, I get to chat with Tanya Fields. She is a nonprofit leader working towards enriching the lives of Black women, girls, and non-men. She tends to focus on mother-led families in order to restore agency, justice, health, and joy. We need all of those things for sure, but I'm so glad she mentioned joy. That we all need more joy in our lives, I think, at this point. Inspired by her experiences as a single mother living in a marginalized community, Tanya founded the Black Feminist Project as a response to sexist institutional policy, structurally reinforced cycles of poverty, and harsh inequities in wealth and access to capital that result in far too many women being unable to rise out of poverty and sustain their families. And I'm so glad Tanya is with us today, the day before a presidential inauguration. And during, the last several months, I think many white Americans have really realized that institutional and structural racism impacts Black and brown and indigenous folks across the country, and they have for centuries. It's about time that they have sort of awakened to those inequities. But at the same time, we're still seeing continued structural racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, and attacks against transgender communities. And so it seems to me, and I think a lot of us, that a lot more work needs to be done, no matter who is president or who's in office. A lot more work needs to be done to create awareness. So thank you so much, Tanya, for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, it's our pleasure. You've done so much. And, you've said on your website and in interviews that empowering mothers is an environmental necessity. And I love that. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that?
I think those of us who are charged, we think of mothering as the ultimate, caregiving. And so I use it in a very broad way. I think many of us mother, even if we aren't biological mothers, even if who we are mothering happens to be our parents or happen to be relatives of children for, children of relatives for whatever reason are not in the position to care for them in that moment. It's considered in many ways mothering. And so for me, it is one of the sort of roles that people play in this country and in this world that I think is oftentimes stigmatized because it is very much thought of as something that is feminine, even if the people who are doing it aren't feminine. Sure. In a capitalist society, it is also, the greatest form of unpaid labor, right? And the labor for which, so much is extracted from those who are doing it and for very little return and support that they see. But it is so critical in terms of the development of a civilization and a society, right? And I think what we see many times in so many communities really is a lack of folks' ability to be able to mother and to caretake in a way which feels communal, which feels supportive. Sure. And then when you, I'm sorry, I'm at home and we've got—
That's okay. We understand.
And
I have no idea.
I am the mother of 6 children.
It's
3
amazing.
And a dog. So clearly my interest also is very much biased because I have the lived experience of knowing what it feels like to not be supported in that. And when you think of it from a sectional approach, when you think about what caretaking and mothering looks like when you're Black, when you're disabled, when you're queer, when you're a femme or a woman, then you really start to see the ways in which society fails those, and then what that looks like reflected in those subcultures and in those communities where that support has not shown up. So for me, we talk a lot about in social justice movements, how we empower people, but I started to see as a mother, very many times the people who were so conspicuously ignored were mothers, and they were so critical to the work being done. And so that's why I really sort of honed in on that. When you lift up, not to sound cliche, the children really are our future. who taking care of the children, right? So if we are not supporting the folks who are doing the work to take care of our future, then what kind of future are we looking at?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you've brought up such a critical point, and people are just fanning you right now. Tanya is an amazing human and she's doing great work. I want to make sure people are getting heard. You know, mothers and caretakers are not just ignored, they're unpaid. Right. And this is, you know, in other societies, you know, where mothering is sort of revered or caretaking is revered, there's not this sort of I think what happens is that mothers are looked down on because they're just mothering, right? They're not doing anything else. How do you think we can change those attitudes?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it starts with one, you know, not having a society that is continually rooted in patriarchy. That's number one. We need to dismantle the patriarchy. We need to dismantle anti-Blackness. I think a lot of what we see around mothering and a lot of what we see around caretaking, and I think I want to say individualism to a fault, right? I'm very much about being the center of your own universe, but I think particularly as an American who's had the privilege of being able to travel and also having friends who are first generation and who are immigrants, there is this stark contrast that we have in terms of collective good. I think that's come out in the pandemic as well. Our inability to be able to flatten the curve because our individual needs supersede everything. And so I think if we can think about the ways to create something new, right? Some balance where caretaking and divine feminine energy, and you don't have to be a woman to acknowledge divine feminine energy, right? Let's think, I mean, Danielle, we could have a whole nother conversation about gender and spectrum and all that, but we only got 20 minutes today. But so just take my word for it, folks, that to acknowledge divine feminine energy does not mean that one has to be a woman, right? And we think about dismantling patriarchal systems that continually are rooted in oppressing anyone who is not a cisgendered, able-bodied white man. I think we can start to get to the root of how do we create stronger societies. I think we just need more leadership from folks who are not able-bodied, cisgendered white men. I think that's the very beginning. That's just a superficial start because there are so many layers to this. There's so much to go through. There isn't one easy answer. But I think, you know, cisgendered, able-bodied men have been given hundreds and hundreds of years in this country to F it up, and they've done a great job in doing that. And so now I think it's time for us to get together collectively and think about what are the needs of the vast majority of us, where those intersections lie, to make sure that we can create a more equitable society, that there's more parity in this society, that it's a safer society for our children.
Absolutely. You've mentioned a couple of really important things here, that we need more diversity in leadership and what it looks like and who is involved. I think we need also sort of more socioeconomic and cultural diversity around who is really helping people make decisions, not just making decisions, but helping people, helping communities make those decisions. You know, toxic masculinity has certainly been a huge part of what we've seen over the last year. I think COVID has only exacerbated that toxic masculinity, whether we're talking about, no Black person I know is surprised by what had happened at the Capitol, last week, while, all of the white folks I know, including me, are. And so I think understanding, the institutional racism that has happened and is happening, and the effects that has, because if that had been a group of Black folks marching up those steps, it would have been a very different outcome. I want to talk.
Blown the whole Capitol up. They would have dropped the whole bomb. The first 50 Black people on the Capitol steps, they'd have just It would have been very different. Important, though, however, and this is not a distinction that I came up with. It's a distinction that I've been reading from other Black Indigenous people of color, primarily women and femmes, who are like, the metric stick needs to stop being whiteness, though, right? Like, we should not be saying anymore, if it was Black people, because it doesn't do us it does a disservice to us, actually, because we're continually we're continuing to give credence to whiteness as the normalcy, right? So for me, I was kind of like, I mean, my knee-jerk reaction was to be like, if Black people did it. But then I was like, so what? Right? Because it's never been, Black people do anything. If Black people breathe, if Black children go to get Skittles and in Arizona, if Black kids play their music too loud, if Black women are in their houses playing a PlayStation with their nephew, if Black women are sleeping next to their partner, it doesn't matter. It does not matter what Black people do. We always end up being the brunt of violence.
Absolutely.
State and white folks who know that they are protected by the state, because that is literally the way that capitalism has been set up in this country. So I don't think that it does us any more of a service to be like, if Black people did it. We already know if Black people just are born, we are at
blamed.
Risk for violence, you know?
Absolutely. And, you know, you also brought up a point about the pandemic and what I have been seeing and hearing now, not just when we're talking about the United States, but really all over the world, how women's burden has increased in homes, at work, you know, with everything that they're doing. And I'm wondering if you can comment a little bit on that and why, you know, so, you know, just talking about the extra burden that they now have because they're taking care of kids, you're taking care of sick and then pets and then cooking and all of these things. And you're probably a caretaker to an elder as well. How, you know, this is having an extreme impact on women right now.
Yeah, the vast majority of folks who have left their jobs after the pandemic has overwhelmingly been women, and overwhelmingly low income women. More affluent women, more affluent white women, more affluent white women who are married have been able to work from home. But folks who, you know, and I'm seeing this in my own staff members, you know, we recently had a meeting with the staff member because we consider ourselves first responders. We have our farm, we're building a community center. I have to be out of my home quite a bit. You know, we ran a food box program to feed people in the community who might be experiencing food insecurity. And so we have staff members who, while they work remotely, when that's not happening, all of my staff have to be somewhere on a weekly basis. We are together on a weekly basis. And we have a staff member who does not have childcare right now. And because of this pandemic, daycare centers are either closed or they are taking a very small amount of children. And because of the nature of the capitalist model around daycare in this country, and it can be inaccessible, especially to low income folks. You know, a lot of times daycare providers are only taking infants because that's where they can get the most subsidy from the state for low income people. And so for folks who have school age children who might be doing remote learning, whose parents might have opted to do what I've done, which is homeschool them. Because remote learning is raggedy right now. You know, they are faced with, am I here and being a responsible caretaker for my children? Or do I go to work and potentially put them at risk? You know, all kinds. It is not an easy choice. It is an impossible choice. But for many people, the choice that they have made, many women, they have made to leave their jobs. And when you're at home 24 hours a day, even if you're trying to work, there's no ebb and flow, right? Like all stuff is now mixed in there together, right? Like maybe you can hold yourself up in the bathroom and run the water for 10 minutes to try to ground yourself. Right. For the most part, your kids don't care. Like my kids came in here and saw me on this call with y'all. And because they're older and because, you know, I'm a psycho when these things happen. So now we're like, but generally, like my younger child, my 5-year-old, he doesn't care. He's going to climb in my lap. He's going to be like, Mom, I would like a waffle. And on Scary Mommy the other day, there was a woman of color who was talking about how she was working remotely, but her employer was giving her a hard time about not being able to manage her children as she worked remotely. And so what it's also done is bring up a lot of underlying discrimination that's based on gendered roles, and mothering is a gendered role. And so now, where folks feel like, you know, this pandemic is bringing out the best in a lot of folks, and it's also bringing out a lot of ugly in a lot of places that were already ugly. They are getting to be even uglier because there's very little ways to enforce that. And so ultimately this woman was laid off after she went to HR to complain about this. And so we're seeing a lot of that happening. And I think what it brings up is just how much of the expectation is that women are supposed to do all of this work. I mean,
right.
a couple weeks ago it went viral, the woman on Twitter who left her job, laid off her staff because her husband said he could not deal with a toddler at home after a week or something like that. He was like, I can't do this. He don't even have a job.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the kind of thing that's been going on. And what I worry about is future setbacks because of this burden, because many women have, as you said, quit their jobs. They are out of the workforce. That's going to, set them back, in their careers for time to come. And so we're only just seeing the impacts that this will have on women and caretakers and folks who possess that divine feminine energy. You mentioned your farm, you mentioned your food box program, and I'm wondering what it means to you to really explore food systems through a radical Black feminist lens.
I think for me, that was the only lens I could explore it through. I inhabit this body. And so, there is no way for me to get around what my lived experiences are. And there are lots of people who inhabit a body that looks very similar to mine, who have very similar experiences. And then when you start to look, right, when you start to look from a pediological and academic, you know what I'm saying, and how we document these things sociologically, when we talk about gender in this country and in many places all over the world where patriarchy has a stronghold, poverty is very much gendered. If you're not ready to have a gendered a conversation around the genderization, if I can make up a word, of poverty, then you're not really ready to have a conversation about it. And then when you look at the intersections of how class and race align in countries like this one, well, then you are also looking at, even within the intersections of gender, that racially there are folks who exist more at the margins. And Black women and Black femmes are the most disenfranchised group of people in this country, and their children. And so food justice is a reflection of that, right? Because food justice is about poverty. It's about economic exclusion. It's about lack of accessibility. It is about, unavailability of land. And so what you are going to look at is the leaves on that branch happen to be Black women and Black children and Black queer leaves. And we are the folks who are suffering the most. And so if we dismantle this system and reimagine and recreate one that is more fair, then Black women and femmes and children have to be at the forefront of leading that. And so it was extremely important to me, who actually, I took sociology in college. My major was a sociological one, so I got my degree in. So very much for me that resonated, to look at it through that lens, because it is informed by having some sort of sociological praxis, right? And my, sociologically, scientifically, this is what the evidence presents. This is the data. And so I was kind of like, okay, well, then that matches with my lived experience. I'm not crazy. It's not about being a snowflake. It's not about the fact that I made bad decisions. It wasn't because I chose poor partners. It wasn't because I came from a broken home. This is a reflection of systemic oppression and institutions that support that then sort of bleed down into the ways in which we relate to each other on a societal level. And in order to do that, we have to affirm the inherent power of the people in those communities, of my folks, of me.
Right. And there is inherent power then there in those communities. I think the natural sort of paradigm that white people have had for many, many years is that we need to go help these communities. They need our help. And that's not what they need. They need capital. They need investment. They need support in different ways, but they know how to help themselves.
Right. Yes, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be here anymore.
Right. Right. And I think that really needs to shift with a new, Congress and a new crop of leaders and community leaders. That really needs to be shifting, that these communities they already understand how to help themselves. One of the things I really like about your work is that you talk about the relationship between food and reproductive justice, that these two things cannot sort of be separated. They are inextricably linked. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I think a lot of people hear the term reproductive justice and they don't actually have a clear definition on what reproductive justice is and the way that it differs from, let's say, reproductive rights or birth control access. Reproductive justice is about the whole. It's about your ability to do family planning. And it's also about your ability to take care of yourself and your family after people are born, right? And so if we're thinking about that, then food justice is a reproductive justice issue. Food justice doesn't start when your kid goes to school and you realize that they get crappy school lunch. Food justice doesn't start when you realize that you can't go to the grocery store and get a lovely butternut squash. Food justice starts in utero. How are you able to nurture yourself and whatever, and the fetus that you are carrying that, if you so choose to, will become a human being in this world. It starts with whether or not you're able to choose, if you're able to choose breastfeeding, if that is a viable choice for you. Because while I am a breast is best advocate and exclusively breastfed 3 of the 6 of my children, and I breastfed all of them, I also understand as a cash poor Black woman that is not a viable reality for many folks, right? And so if I work at Food Bazaar, if I'm a cashier at Food Bazaar, I don't get paid maternal leave, and I go back 4 weeks after my child is born, like when the baby still has the vernix still on it, right? When the baby still smell like coochie and womb, and I have to take this baby, drop it off with a daycare provider or co-parent, and technically, the law says I'm supposed to be provided a safe space to breastfeed, but we know that societally we don't actually really value that. Then what I'm going to end up with is almost an impossible choice, because I know that if I am leaving my register every 2 hours to pump in a quiet place where I need to be relaxed, I need to calm down in order for my milk to let down, and it can take me a half an hour to 45 minutes to pump 4 or 5 ounces of milk for my child. And then I need to put the pressure on my boss to provide me a refrigerated space. My boss is going to find a reason to fire me, and I know that. And so what happens is, for women who would still like to breastfeed their child, I'm just going to give this kid Similac or Enfamil or Prosorbi or whatever is out here in the my child's 5, so I don't know what's happening in these formula streets, but whatever, like whatever there is, then folks don't have the ability to do that. And it doesn't really, then what they're faced with not really is a choice. And if I am breastfeeding, but I live in a community where I still can't get amazing butternut squash, can't get kale, and I can't get romaine lettuce, and all of the things that I'm doing right now here in my kitchen before we got on this call, and I'm small batch cooking. I'm a cash poor woman who has a lot of privilege, and I realized that. And it was 12, it's the culmination of me busting my tuchus, you know what I'm saying, and making a lot of sacrifices and having a lot of these conversations and being openly ridiculed to my face in order for me to get this privilege. But I do this work and I fight so that women like myself don't have to wait 12 years to be able to like prepare a week's worth of meals for their children.
Sure.
We all have the help that we need as women anywhere along the spectrum of ethnicity and race, but knowing that Black women and Black queer femmes are the ones who are really, at the brunt of feeling the negative impacts of not having this being societally accepted. So we've got to put pressure on the institutions to make this change. But a law or a rule or whatever you want to call it is only as good as its enforcement. And we only enforce things that we believe in. We believe in killing Black bodies, and that's why we will let police enforce certain types of rules, right? Because we as a society don't see anything wrong with killing Black people, right? And one of the commenters just said you can't even adopt a puppy, 8 weeks before it's born. After it's born, but you can work when your child is 4 weeks old, and for many women, that's the choice that they have to make. We as a society see more value in the lives of puppies than we do our own children, who are our future.
Absolutely, absolutely. All of these impossible choices that you have talked about, all of the things that folks have to endure. We need to change our belief systems, and we need to start thinking about folks who don't look like ourselves. One of the things that, you've done is start the cooking series, Mama Tanya's Kitchen, to really help people. And I think it's so empowering to teach people, it's not just about cooking, right? It's about eating. It's about joy that we mentioned before. It's about all of these things that nourish bodies. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you decided to start the series?
So it was really, and speaking of food, just give me 1 second because I smell my roasted vegetables in the oven.
Absolutely, take your time. Take your time. No, and I think more comments, the better. Tanya's doing amazing work, and everyone needs a little bit more support as they do this work. We'll give out her website. It's the blackfeministproject.org. You can go to Mama's, you can follow her at Mama Tanya's Kitchen on Instagram, but I'm sure she would appreciate donations for the good work that they're doing, especially with the Corona relief food boxes. So Tanya's back.
Yes, my vegetables smell amazing. They're not quite there yet. I'm making some. So, that was a great segue too, Danielle, talking about Mama Tanya's Kitchen, because I'm in here doing batch cooking. And I have, spent the last, 15 years of my life increasing my literacy around nutrition, which is really important. And I'm always, and people always discount it, especially in the social justice world, like some frilly thing. But like what you put in your body is literally the thing that's going to determine your health and whether or not it's going to keep you alive, right? That's why food is a thing, because capitalism has figured out that they can manipulate the food system and then do all of this weird stuff, and it will make them more money while also keeping people really, really sick, right? And it's always interesting to me how little food literacy or nutrition literacy we all have as Americans, right? But then again, when you start looking at those intersections, then you start seeing who's the most marginalized.
COVID has really brought that up, Tanya. Who is the most marginalized? The folks who have suffered the most from COVID-19 are BIPOC folks, because they have not had access or been able to afford healthy, delicious food.
Right. And I generally will stay away from the term healthy because capitalism has commodified it. It's become a it's become a like status. And a sign of class. So the language that I use a lot of times when I'm doing this work is nutrient dense food, right? And also in that commodification of the term healthy, it's become also very sanitized, very homogenized, and very white. We think of healthy as only butternut squash, right? And salad, right? And wheat germ. And that don't resonate with a lot of us from the diaspora. Cassava is healthy. Rice and beans is healthy, right? Fufu is healthy to us.
Right.
And so we, I really want to think about the ways in which we use language. And that's kind of the reason that I started this. But it also was an offshoot of the work that we were doing at the Black Feminist Project around nutrition education, and really wanting to think about how to turn it on its head, and also how to really get away from this idea that individuals make the shift. Like, I buy all of my groceries organic, and I spend quite a bit of money. Part of my food budget is I'm a SNAP recipient, right? But also because I work and because I have an organization and I am able to have access to, like a flex spend account through my fiscal sponsor for my organization. Like, I also spend an additional $2,000 to feed myself and my 6 children. Sure. Even the animals, we even get good food for the animals, right? Because it's important.
I love
it. Beings, right? And so we buy lots of stuff grass-fed. We buy lots of stuff organic. And guess what? I made that individual choice, and I still have not shifted what it means for Black folks, cash poor Black folks, and working class folks to go out here and have access to nutrient-dense food. It is an institutional thing that needs to happen. It is
Sure.
a systemic thing that needs to happen. And so we need to have those conversations as we talk about food, while also not further marginalizing people and further and further dehumanizing people. So I'm very careful
Right.
with what we use. And so I would go out on this bus. We had a bus a couple years ago in which we would put all this sustainable, organic, freshly grown local food on, and we would go park in front of the McDonald's in Mott Haven on Brook Avenue. And we would encourage people to come over, right? Because also what we deem as unhealthy too doesn't also have to do with the actual food itself. We are seeing a lot of people who have gluten allergies now, but this thing has come up in studies is it actually the gluten or is it the pesticides that we put on the wheat, right? If we had a equitable, organically grown, sustainable food system,
Sure.
probably wouldn't be as many people with gluten allergies, right? We talk about rice as being bad, right? But it's the type of rice that we're eating that's been genetically engineered, right? Because black rice, which for me speaks to me diasporically as a African in America, black rice has all of these antioxidants. It's
Sure.
low in its caloric intake, but where you get black rice at? You can't find black rice even at Whole Foods. You can't really find black rice, and if you find it, it's a little box that's less than a pound, and it costs literally like $8.
Sure.
I bought some black rice off of Amazon. A 32-pound bag cost me $76.99. So it's also about what do we have exposure to. So I would go in places and show them there's not just white potatoes. We got blue and purple potatoes. This is what an heirloom egg looks like. Yes, the shell is actually blue. Yes, it did come out of the chicken. I did not dye it. So astounded. But at the same time, they'd be very reticent because they'd never seen this before. So I said, well, what's the best way to get people's buy-in around food? Well, you feed them the food. If you go to Trader Joe's and Trader Joe's is a new product, there's a lovely woman standing in the aisle asking you, do you want to try this cheese puff? And it's free. You eat it and you either love it or you hate it or you're ambivalent and you either buy it or you don't. And so I started doing the same thing. And people loved the language that I was using around this. People loved the way I responded to them. They loved the fact that a homegirl was in the hood doing food demos, and that it wasn't someone who, I love you, Danielle, but who looks who went to the core, who lives on the Upper West Side, who decided very much like you said, I need to go save the blacks, and was going to come up here and show us how to make a quinoa salad with raisins. Nobody up here is eating that shit. So they were really encouraged by the fact that I was like, okay, we're going to make a jerk chicken salad, right? And this is how you love it. Right. And I'm gonna, and I was making up these recipes where instead I was taking egg rolls and putting kale and collard greens inside of them and black-eyed peas, and then telling you to, instead of deep frying them, put them in the oven, or now my new thing is the air fryer. Put it in the air fryer. People responded to it so positively that folks started asking me to do it more and more. And then what I realized is that there was a market for this. If I can tap into my own inner capitalist, there was a market for it. And on many levels, people needed to see a almost 6-foot, dark-skinned, African-featured Black woman, right? That we don't see women who look like me in the lifestyle genre, in the food genre. At that time, I was 300 pounds. And so it was important to see a fat body talking about food justice. And it was really important that it be in a language that was validated because I was using it, right? I didn't need to code switch, and that I didn't need to talk differently, that I was saying that we are inherently valuable and we are inherently valid because we exist.
Absolutely. It's wonderful. It's so wonderful. And I'm so glad Mama Tanya's Kitchen exists. I want to talk a little bit, and maybe this is our final question because we're kind of running out of time, but, through those Corona relief food boxes that the Black Feminist Project offers, you have been able to offer opportunities for what you call wealth redistribution. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how that works and what that looks like.
Yeah. So, this country owes Black people and Indigenous people more than it could ever pay back in my lifetime. And I believe that it is my responsibility when I have access to funds that have come through channels that are gatekept by, the establishment and white folks, that I, as a recipient of that and as an agent, not a gatekeeper, and to take it even further, allow people to have access. And I don't want to say wealth, because what we're doing is not wealth. Me giving a mom whose car has broken down $500 for a new transmission is hardly wealth. I'm just helping her keep her head above water that day. For many of us, to listen, it can be the difference. That kind of emergency can be the difference between your life completely falling apart for the 6 months or not. And it's really that dire for so many folks. And so for me, I'm like, if I was able to raise $300,000 this year, doing the dance that we do with the grants and raising money and throwing money in the pot, then I feel obligated to take $50,000 or $60,000 or $100,000 of that money and make sure I put it in the hands of Black women and femmes and children with very little obstacle. And so what happens is we have women and femmes who reach out to us and say, any myriad of things. My lights are getting turned off. My lights have been turned off. I'm leaving a domestic violence issue, or something like, I've been working really hard and my kid has been wanting to do a movie night for forever and I do not have the disposable income to do it.
Sure.
Right? And these are things that most folks in middle America take for granted.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to poor Black women and children, all of a sudden they don't supposed to get their hair done. They supposed to be out here looking a mess. Not supposed to have an iPhone. I guess we supposed to use a tin can and some string to communicate with a girl. Like, all of a sudden we start having all these really rigid and frugal ideas around what people should or should not be doing with money. I don't believe in that. We have to exist and navigate a capitalist system. So even if a mom wants to take her kids to rent a movie online during this pandemic, and she's been working, she's an essential worker, she's been working and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
To me, and they say, hey girl, I was hoping we could get a mutual aid grant for $100 so I could do this thing. I encourage people like, well, what if folks scam you? Well, folks are not going to scam me if I'm saying that whatever you need it for is valid, right? And, and it's able-bodied women. If you call me and be like, hey, I want to buy my man a PS5, that's probably not the boundary.
But Tanya, it's that joy that, like, we started this conversation off with. It's that all of us need joy, no matter where we live, who we are, what we look like, who we sleep with, what we eat. We all need joy in our lives. And that's such a beautiful thing that you're providing. And that's going to make me cry. So I'm going to let people know that they can find out more about you at the blackfeministproject.org. Can they also donate there, Tanya?
Yes, we have a campaign. We are building the Alice Fields Community Center for Black women, girls, and mages. Mages stands for marginalized genders. We have just secured a 2,000 square foot space, a former church, actually. Wow. Leases signed, deposits have been dropped. They have started demolition, and we are in the next phase, which is the planning of the build out. And the center is going to have a commercial kitchen, a small retail space and pantry space for people to come in and use any means, including food stamps, to buy fancy food. I'm always like, let's bring the fancy back to food justice, so folks can come in and use any of those means to buy food. And there will be certain days where we have pantry. People can come in and shop at the pantry. No lines. You book an appointment, and between 2 and 3, you can come in and get what you need to get.
Love it.
Boxes are always tailored to family size. We don't give you just what we give you. We ask you how many people in your family, and then we give you enough food to feed those people 2 days out of the week, for the week.
I love it.
6 people in your family, we're going to give you enough food for 2 days for all 6 of those people. And if we've had people tell us too that they got pets, so we'll throw a couple extra things in there for the pets too, because poor people have pets.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree more.
People can donate there, because all of the money that we're raising now will go to building that out. It will have, a child care space in there where moms can come in and do kind of that gymboree, mommy and me playtime stuff.
Sure.
We will have classrooms so that we can do radical education. We will have a community space / dining hall because food is very important to us. And my staff will tell you, I feed folks. Well, I think one of our biggest line items when we do our expenses is the fringe benefit of organization that always has meals. My staff comes to work, you don't pay for any meals. And I feel that same way in our community. When we open up community spaces to folks, there should always be food. If my kids go to the YMCA should have food for my kids. If my kids go to wherever, there should always be food.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, Tanya, you are amazing. Again, it's the blackfeministproject.org. That the has to be in front of there. Please donate. You're doing incredible work, Tanya. You are a treasure and a hero to so many of us. Thank you for the work that you do. Please stay safe and well. The world needs you.
Thank you.